In the previous episode, we explored how Chicago began as a small trading post in the early 1800s. Railroads and industry transformed it into one of America's fastest-growing cities, and how a devastating event in 1871 would change Chicago forever. That event was the Great Chicago Fire. On the night of October 8th, 1870, a small fire began in a barn on Chicago's west side. At first, it seemed like just another minor accident. But Chicago was a city built mostly from wood. Wooden houses, wooden sidewalks, wooden buildings packed tightly together. Strong winds began pushing the flames across the city. Within hours, the fire was unstoppable. Buildings ignited one after another. Entire streets disappeared in flames. Residents fled with whatever they could carry. Families ran through burning streets. Smoke filled the sky. By the time the fire finally stopped 2 days later, over 17,000 buildings had been destroyed. More than 100,000 people were left homeless. Nearly 1/3 of the city was gone. Chicago looked like a wasteland of ash and ruins. Many believed the city would never recover, but Chicago had something powerful: determination. Almost immediately after the fire, Chicago began rebuilding. Architects, engineers, and investors saw opportunity in destruction. They wanted to create a new kind of city. A stronger city, a modern city. New building codes were introduced to prevent future disasters. Brick, steel, and stone replaced wood. But the biggest change was yet to come. A new idea was about to transform architecture forever: the skyscraper. In 1885, Chicago completed a building unlike anything the world had seen. The home insurance building. It stood 10 stories tall. Today that might not sound impressive, but at the time, it was revolutionary. For the first time, a building used a steel frame structure instead of heavy stone walls. This allowed buildings to grow taller and taller. Chicago had invented the modern skyscraper. Soon, the city's skyline began to change dramatically. Architects experimented with bold new designs. Steel towers rose above the streets. The skyline of Chicago became a symbol of innovation. By the late 1800s, Chicago had become the industrial heart of America. Factories covered huge sections of the city. Railroads connected Chicago to every corner of the country. Meatpacking plants, steel mills, and warehouses created thousands of jobs. Immigrants from Europe flooded into the city. They came from Ireland, Poland, Germany, Italy, and many other nations. Each community brought its culture, traditions, and food. Chicago quickly became one of the most diverse cities in the United States. But rapid growth also created problems: overcrowded neighborhoods, dangerous working conditions, and rising tensions between workers and factory owners. Chicago soon became the center of labor activism. Workers demanded better wages, shorter working hours, safer workplaces. In 1886, thousands of workers gathered for protests, demanding an 8-hour workday. One protest in Chicago would become famous around the world: the Haymarket Affair. During a peaceful demonstration, violence suddenly erupted. A bomb exploded. Gunfire followed. Chaos spread through the streets. The event shocked the nation and forever linked Chicago with the struggle for workers' rights. Despite challenges, Chicago continued to grow. In 1893, the city hosted one of the most important events in American history: the World's Columbian Exposition, also known as the Chicago World's Fair. Millions of visitors arrived from around the globe. The fair showcased incredible inventions and innovations. Electric lights illuminated massive white buildings. For many people, it was their first time seeing electricity used on such a large scale. One of the most famous attractions was a brand new invention: the Ferris wheel. Created by engineer George Ferris, it became one of the most iconic symbols of the fair. For Chicago, the event proved something important. The city was no longer just a growing industrial town. It had become a world city. As the 20th century began, Chicago entered a new era. The city grew even faster, but the 1920s brought something unexpected: Prohibition. The United States banned the sale of alcohol, but in Chicago, alcohol never truly disappeared. Instead, it went underground. Illegal bars called speakeasies appeared across the city. Bootleggers smuggled alcohol, and organized crime took control. One name became legendary during this time: Al Capone. Capone built a powerful criminal empire in Chicago. Violence between rival gangs became common. The most infamous event happened in 1929. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre. 7 gang members were killed in a shocking attack. The incident made headlines across the world. Chicago had gained a reputation as America's crime capital. Over time, Chicago began changing once again. The city expanded its infrastructure. Subways, highways, and airports connected Chicago to the world. New skyscrapers reshaped the skyline. In 1973, the Sears Tower was completed. At the time, it was the tallest building in the world, today known as the Willis Tower. It remains one of the most recognizable buildings in America. Chicago had fully transformed into a modern metropolis. Today, Chicago is one of the largest and most influential cities in the United States. It is known for its architecture, its music, its sports teams, and its powerful cultural identity. Millions of people visit Chicago every year. They walk along the Chicago River. They explore the museums. They admire the skyline that began with the world's first skyscrapers. But Chicago's story is more than just buildings. It is a story of resilience. A city that rose from ashes after one of the greatest fires in history. A city that transformed tragedy into innovation. And a city that helped shape modern urban life. From a small trading outpost to a burning city, to one of the greatest skylines on Earth. Chicago has always been a city that refuses to stop growing. And as new buildings rise and new generations shape its future, the story of Chicago is still being written.